Welcome to Cybersecurity Sense, a weekly podcast providing updates and insight into the latest in cybersecurity. Brought to you by LBMC Information Security. Now, here's your host.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to LBMC Cybersecurity Sense. This is your host, William Parks, and today we've got an awesome podcast for everybody here. So buckle up and get ready as we talk about some cool topics that pertain to you and your own safety this month of October, which is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we have Mark Burnette here on the line. Mark is actually the practice leader for LBMC Advisory Services, and he's also the shareholder in charge at LBMC Information Security. So super happy to have him on the phone right now, and we're going to jump straight into it. So sit back, relax, and hopefully you're having a good walk or a good drive, and enjoy the episode. All righty. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
I'm doing fine, William. How are you today?
Doing great. Getting ready to harp on some awesome things about this month because it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And
this is definitely an exciting month for those of us that work in cybersecurity. And one of the things I'm very passionate about, as you know, of course, we work hard trying to help our clients, but I get lots of requests when I talk to friends and family, and they're like, "Hey, I know you're working with my employer, but what about me? What about my family? How do I keep my grandparents safe, my children safe, those types of things?" And, so it's just really important that people be aware of the types of things they can be doing to protect their privacy and their security.
Right. No, I agree. And I mean, sometimes I find myself wondering the same thing. And I know I've experienced a lot of the same as you, as far as whenever I'm on calls with clients and speaking with them, yes, we talk about the company and the organization stuff a lot, but really what can you do on your end? Because obviously your own personal Gmail account is not the same as an Outlook email account.
Right.
You're not governed the same way.
Yeah.
So I guess we have a few points here that we want to share with you guys. A few things we're going to cover today, such as how do you create a strong and unique password? How do you manage that? What are some like practical social media safety tips that you can use, and how do you secure your home computers? One of the most common things I feel like I hear is, how do I secure my home network? Is my router hacked? Have people gotten into my home Wi-Fi? And how do you monitor your identity information? How do you make sure that your stuff isn't sitting out there for anybody to see? So I guess the first thing we'll jump right into is how do we get a unique password, Mark? Like, what's the process?
Yeah. So, the one thing, William, to think about here, passwords are the way that we prove our identity to a computer because, when you think about trying to log into your online banking site or your social media accounts or, the retail sites that you frequent like Amazon, those types of things, Amazon needs to know that you are who you say you are. And so the way they do that is there's a shared secret, a password that you programmed. And so as long as you're the only one that knows that password, then Amazon can know for certain every time someone logs in with that, it must be you, right? Well, the problem that's evolved over the years is we all have so many passwords that it's really difficult to keep track of them all. So people sometimes fall into the trap of saying, you know what, I'm just going to use one password and I'm going to use it on a bunch of my sites. That way I can remember it. I can make it strong, but I can remember it, right? Well, the problem with that, William, is that if one of those sites is compromised, is hacked, and we see this a lot. I know, what one of the services that you provide to our clients for your expertise is penetration testing, hired hacking. And if you guys are able to compromise a website and you're able to get the password database, then, you're able to potentially use those passwords to log in as those users. And, we all have a Facebook password. And if you're using the same password for Facebook and you're using that same password on other sites, you might not care if someone got your Facebook password and logged in as you. But, if you had that same password and you used it on your banking site and someone logged in as you, well, you'd probably care about that. And you may say, well, how would they do that? Well, the answer is a lot of people use the email address. They'll use a standard email address when they register for Facebook, and they'll use that same email address, of course, when they register for their banking sites. Well, that's what your username is on most online sites, right? So that's why having a different password on each of our sites is so important. But of course, William, as you know, the challenge with that is because we've already acknowledged it's so darn hard to remember all those passwords. you get to the point of like, oh my gosh, so what do I do? Do I write them down? Do I save them in a file on my computer? And of course, I know you're laughing right now because I know you could probably tell plenty of stories of computers that you've compromised as a part of your activities where you found password files just sitting there for the taking. And so that's obviously not a good option. But that's why that brings us to a really important point. And so talking about choosing strong passwords, a few things really that hope people can take away. First of all, passwords need to be pretty long these days. Ideally, it's a randomly generated password with at least 16 characters, or you can use something like passphrases. And in the password world now, in the cybersecurity world, we tell people a lot. It's easier to use a longer password, even if it's all common words, than it would be to use a shorter password that has a bunch of special characters and things because of the way computing power works. And William, you could probably do a whole podcast on cracking passwords and explain to listeners how that works. But you might say something like pick 3 common words and mash them together. So, for example, watermelon, picture, muscle, something like that. Mash all those words together and use that as a password. And that's going to be a pretty strong password, difficult even for password crackers to get in the period of time that they would have. So that's one important point is we got to choose long passwords. And then back to my question about, well, how do we keep up with all these? Well, please don't write them down. Use a password vault. There are freely available password vaults that can be used. Something like LastPass is an example. 1Password is another one. And most of those will make the software can be made available for free for personal use. And people can use those. And that software will actually generate the password. For example, I don't know my Facebook password. I know that it's 21 characters. I know that it's randomly generated, but I don't need to know it because when I go to log into Facebook, all I have to do is I know 1Password. I log into my password vault, and my password vault logs into all of those other accounts for me whenever I go to visit those.
Oh, you're completely right. And I mean, it's so true. It is so helpful. I use the same thing. The password manager, I don't know any of my passwords. I don't think I know a single password other than the password to my password vault.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
um,
it's, man, thinking about how our profession has evolved to get to that, William, I know for a period of time, it was almost impossible. And when we would visit offices and things, you'd flip over keyboards and you'd see, under the keyboard would be the sticky noted password, because again, so hard for people to remember all their passwords. But thank goodness for password vaults that allow us to choose good, long, strong passwords, and we don't have to keep up with them.
Right. It is so nice. And also to that point with password managers, I can't speak to Androids, but iPhones, I know that a lot of them, they actually integrate the Face ID into it too. So you don't have to sit there and type out a 20 character long password. It's super fast. And it's really well integrated into the phones nowadays.
Yeah, you're
Um,
exactly right. You're exactly right. A lot of these hardware vendors, including Apple, have integrated either the Face ID or the Touch ID, those types of things, and it does all the encryption for you. And it's just as good as actually logging in with the password. So that's a great point. One other thing on passwords, William, before we move on, most of your online sites these days that people will use, their social media sites, many of their banking sites. I know Apple, Google, PayPal, Dropbox, Amazon will all allow something called multi-factor authentication. And this is the idea that in addition to a password, you've got to provide something else that only you would have. And when we talk about multiple factors, ideally, there are 3 kind of ways we prove our identity: with something we know, like a password, something we have, like a token of some kind, something we possess, or something we are. That's a biometric. So if you use the example of Face ID, well, that's your biometric because your phone is reading, your face, doing a face scan and forming a biometric. Or Touch ID is your fingerprint. That's a biometric. So something a password, and something you are, biometric. That's multi-factor. Well, a lot of these online sites these days will allow you to turn on multi-factor. In some case, they call it 2-step verification. And what that does is if someone does somehow guess or obtain your password for that site, they're still not going to be able to log in as you because they won't have the other factor. The most common ways these free sites use it is by using an SMS text message. And so, for example, if someone tries to log into my Facebook account and they try to, if somehow they were able to guess my password, that Facebook is actually going to send me a text message with a 6-letter code for me to put in, or 6-digit code. And, obviously that's going to come to my phone. So they would need physical possession of my phone. More importantly than that, if that happened, I would know immediately someone had my password because, if I got a text, I'm not trying to log into Facebook. That means someone's got my password. I need to immediately go out and change my password, notify Facebook of compromise, whatever that might be. So
Right.
turning on that multi-factor or the two-step verification is really important. It's easy to do, and it can really provide that extra measure of protection around password security.
Right. And I mean, I've experienced this as well. A lot of times these attackers, when they get your password on certain services and sites, this is why multi-factor is a really helpful thing. They're very smart and they know to not attack or try and log into your account at a normal time where you would be awake. A lot of times it's going to be at 1 or 2 a.m. when people are sleeping. Um, so that just adds more so to the multi-factor, two-factor. You probably should put that on if you really want to be safe and have that extra bubble of security there for your accounts and your stuff.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I guess the next thing we'll move on to the next topic, Mark. But
That's good.
so as far as social media safety goes, what do we do to really be careful about that? Because now that we have Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all these things are massive. How do we keep ourselves safe on social media?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say social media, it's a great way that we can interact with friends and family, particularly those who don't live in the same community as us. And I know it's been a great way for me to keep my parents who don't live in the same city as I do, grandparents and things, and they can see what our kids have done as they've grown up. So they are great, and I don't want people to be so afraid that they're afraid to use social media, but there's some common sense things we can do. First of all, when we're setting up a social media site, and this is particularly true for your children now, if you're at the point where you've got children who are becoming teenagers, and you're making the decision that you're ready for them to have a phone and have social media and all that, don't give their actual birthday when you set up the social media account. There's no reason that Facebook should know the actual birthday, because again, with birthday and a name, people can steal an identity. So that's not, we wouldn't want that. So what we actually do is we have an online birthday. In my case, every social media site that I've signed up for over the years, I've provided the same online birthday. It's not my birthday, but it's an online birthday. And so the cool part about that is, over the years, as my kids have grown up, we've gotten to celebrate my birthday twice a year, once on my real birthday and then once on my online birthday, because I'll get the birthday club free burger at the local burger joint, because when I signed up for their birthday club, I gave the online birthday, and so they're like, "Yeah, it's Dad's online birthday, free burger." So be thinking about that. The social media sites. My general rule is, unless it's the United States government and it's official business, they probably don't really need my real birthday. So I generally use my online birthday, because I'm not going to trust the entity to take care of my identity. So that's the first thing to think about when setting up those accounts or signing up for your social media accounts. The second thing, we mentioned it a minute ago with passwords. Make sure you configure all your social media accounts for two-step authentication, so that, and by the way, you may think, well, man, that'd be insanely inconvenient. I don't want to get a text message every time I go to log into Instagram on my phone. Here's the cool part. That's not how it works. The first time you log in from a device, you can set that device as a trusted device, and the social media account will actually put something on that device so that it knows it's a trusted device, and it won't require the two-factor token again. The only time it's going to require the token is if you or someone else, logs into your account from a device that hasn't previously been used. Then it would require the token again. So it's great. You set it up the first time, you log in once, you never have to do that again, unless someone steals your account, and which point you'd know, because you'd get the notification from the token. So that's an important thing to remember on the social media sites. The third thing is really thinking about what we post. A couple things on this. First of all, I would suggest you consider posting about business trips and vacations after you get back from the business trip and vacation, because that's actually, if you wanted to kind of, think about it, it's one way to tell thieves, hey, we're not at home right now, we're in Aruba on vacation, and so you're kind of making yourself a soft target right there, right? So generally, what I'd suggest is take the pictures when you get back, post and say, man, we had a great week last week on our family vacation. Here's some pictures. And by the way, if you'd love to hear more about it, we'd love to catch up. Let's get together and talk. We can tell you about something like that. So, and the same is true for business trips, particularly for people who have spouses, families, roommates, those types of things. I hate to, whenever I travel somewhere, I typically won't acknowledge I'm out of town until after I get back, because I wouldn't want anyone, whether it's an attacker or someone with other malicious intent, to know my wife and kids might be at the house without me. And so that's something else to be thoughtful about. But then also, it's what we say. Generally, what I like to coach people is don't post it on social media unless you be cool saying it directly to your grandmother's face, and that'll help you avoid saying very incendiary things. And a lot of times employers are doing as a part of their background checks now, they're checking social media profiles and they're making hiring decisions based on characteristics on social media profiles. So that includes pictures and different things people may have posted. And I'm sure all of us have seen or read in the media certain people who've gotten into positions of authority, and then later their credibility has been undermined because of a post they made many years ago, on Twitter or on Facebook or something, and the media dug it up and it undermined their credibility and so something like that. So just be careful about what you post. Once it's posted, it's still out there, even if you delete it. The way Google works, it indexes everything almost immediately. So don't assume that when you post it and then you delete it later because you rethought what you wanted to say, that it's not there. It's been indexed, it's available, it could be recovered. So it's better just not to post something that you'd be ashamed of later. Just a couple more things on this topic, William, as well, that are important to think about. All these social media sites are provided for free. Nobody pays for Facebook, right? And so what you can be sure of is that the reason these social media sites are providing their content for free and providing the platform for free and updating it regularly and all that is because they want to make money off of the users. And that's fine. That's not a secret, no shock there. One of the ways they're making money, of course, is the ads that they're putting in front of us when we're on the social media sites. But the other way they're making money is from the data they're gathering about us. And that's where a lot of people, when they find out the amount of data that the various social media sites are gathering about them, they become very uncomfortable. And so there are several things you can do in your social media sites to that you can actually tell them, I do not want you capturing this data about me, and I want you to forget all the data that you've about me. And you have the rights as an American and as a user to do that. And so I would suggest that if you're one that's concerned about privacy or concerned about these social media companies building a profile about you and then selling that you turn that off. And there's a future off Facebook activity setting in Facebook. There's also a clear history setting in Facebook, for example. That's one of the sites that many people use. That you can adjust that, and if Facebook will forget lots of what it knows about you. Now, of course, we need to be aware when we do that. While in most cases the reputable social media sites will honor that, it means they won't be able to give you targeted ad content. So you're still going to get ads. It's just going to be random weird ads. It won't be stuff that's in your demographic or in your age range or whatever life stage you're in. So it is going to change how they interact with you. But if you're concerned about your privacy, you're probably not going to care.
And also as well on iPhone and Android, because I've seen this on my last phone, it does actually tell you on the top right corner or in little areas on the phone when an app is actually tracking you or when they're looking at your information.
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's like if you don't want to turn off the request to track feature, just have a quick look and see when the last time was that Facebook or a different app actually tracked to see what you were doing.
Yep. So. That's a great tip, William. Is if people are curious, I know the first time I went out to Facebook and asked it to show me all the data that it had on me, it was very eye-opening to see how much they knew about me personally as an individual and the people in my household.
It's incredible. Yeah. And thank goodness they have your online birthday. So
that's right. They think they know how old I am.
Right. So I guess the next step of everything that we're talking about here as we continue further into the conversation is how do you secure your home computers? And truthfully, what can you do to make sure that nobody gets into your desktop at your desk at home?
Yeah, this is a big one. Most of us have a computer that at work that our company gives us, and we take it for granted that most of our organizations are probably taking steps to secure that computer. And hopefully that's true for many of our employers. But the things we have at home, our employers aren't touching those, and so it's up to us to make sure that we're taking the right steps to secure those. And the first thing is we've got to keep those computers up to date. And by up to date, it means running the most recent version of the operating system on the computer. So, if you're running an Apple, make sure you're running the newest Apple operating system. If you're running Windows, make sure you're running the newest version of Windows. Those types of things on the computers. And that applies to mobile devices as well. Now, the good news is we can set a setting so that the computers and the mobile devices will notify us when there's a new update available, so we can quickly install that and move on and have that peace of mind knowing that we're using the newest version of the operating system. And so that's an important thing that all of us should do. And the reason that matters, by the way, William, just to make sure all the listeners know, is that a lot of times, when these manufacturers develop the operating systems, they do try to make them secure, but because they're programmed by humans, every now and then there'll be some flaws, and over
Right.
time, people like both the bad guys, the attackers, as well as researchers like you find these flaws, and they realize that these flaws could be exploited to take control of the computer or steal data or something, and so they make the developer aware of the flaws, and so the developer will issue an upgrade or an update or a patch. And so that's why it's important that we're regularly patching our computers and that we're running the most recent version of the operating system, because that will incorporate all the patches and the fixes to address the known flaws that have already been published about that operating system.
Right. Right. And they come out quite a bit more than you would expect if you really look at your updates. I know every week Microsoft releases one for Windows, so just make sure you stay on top of that stuff, guys, because that really can be the biggest line of defense right there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
front line.
That is definitely low hanging fruit. It's easy, it's free, and if you want to, you can actually tell your computer to apply those updates automatically. You don't even have to you don't have to go in and do it yourself. You can say, hey, every time there's one available, apply it automatically. And as long as the computer's powered on, it will apply it, it will reboot itself, and it'll be ready for you the next time you come to use the computer. Typically,
Right.
it does that overnight while you're asleep.
Right, right. Well, so the next thing that I have to ask you about, 'cause this is a big buzzword that I hear used quite a bit, but is there something correlating with the firewall in the computer, and how does that work? Does it really keep me protected? What what is the nuance behind that?
Yeah, a firewall is basically it's a set of network instructions that tells a computer what to allow in and what to block on a computer and on a network. That's in essence, if you wanted to simplify what a firewall does. And so, all the operating system manufacturers include firewall capabilities, and they're free to activate. And so, on Windows and on Apple devices, you can activate the firewall, and it will perform some logic, and it will block all the stuff that it thinks needs to be blocked, and it will only allow in the things that it believes you need. And so it does provide you with a measure of protection against the common types of attacks and some of those things that might be out there. So it's always good practice to turn on the firewall software, as well as, William, because usually these are settings right below each other on the same screen, the anti-malware protection that's built into the operating system. In the old days, we call this antivirus software, but these days we've expanded it to talk about malware, because it's much more than just viruses. Maybe people have heard of ransomware and some other things like that. So the anti-malware software will actually help insulate your computer, and reduce the chance, not eliminate, but reduce the chance that you could get infected by viruses and the other types of nefarious things that are floating around on the internet. So it's really important to turn on that firewall and then activate anti-malware software. And if you have a computer that doesn't have it built in for free, then go to your favorite tech store and buy one. It's relatively inexpensive. It is well worth the cost to invest in anti-malware protection.
Right. Oh, completely agree. And I mean, even so, like Mark is saying, it does detect a lot of the common types of attacks that people will try or they could try. Having seen that first person, because that's the kind of job that I do, is to attack these devices for companies and tell them how we got in to help them out. Um, a lot of these solutions, especially Windows Defender, will catch a lot of things that we do. So it truthfully it's very helpful to have this stuff enabled and turned on for you.
Yeah. Yeah. William, just one more tip on this, and then I'd love to move on and talk about networks, because that's, we talk about computers, but our home
For sure.
networks are also vulnerable. Um, Make sure you've turned on a password on your home computer. By default, some computers may not require you to put a password, but you should put a password on there. And then also, as a part of that, you'll have the ability to enable encryption of that hard drive of that computer as well, and that will provide a measure of protection. Typically, that encryption is tied to the password. So when you put a password in, it uses that password to develop an encryption scheme, and then it uses that to encrypt your hard drive. And how that benefits you is, particularly if if your computer's stolen and the bad guy doesn't know your password, but they take the hard drive out of your computer and they try to put it into another computer and read it, they won't be able to read it because it will be encrypted. And so the data that's on it would be protected from them accessing it, even though they would have physical possession of your computer. So make sure you turned on encryption and activated a password on your home computers as well.
Right. So moving on to networking, aside from just your home computer, this is kind of the thing that governs all the Wi-Fi and networking your house. This is actually another really common thing to make sure that you have updated and you have upgraded and patched, because this is the gateway to your device on your home network. So Mark, I guess the first thing that we can probably just assume is that we want to make sure our router is always up to date. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And the thing to think about here, William, is many people are using a broadband connection. I know not all of our listeners are, but many people use a broadband connection, and that broadband connection is provided by their telecom provider or their cable provider or something like that. And so what happened was when they subscribed, the friendly technician showed up at their house or shipped them a router, and they plugged the router in, and the blinky light started blinking, and the internet started working. And so they went, hooray, everything works. And that was that. And so those providers, because they don't know exactly how the router is going to be used or the unique configurations of the homes, they have everything turned on by default. And that way the router works the way it should. And so it's kind of up to us to take control of that and actually change some of the configurations. And one of the important things that you mentioned is firmware, which is like the operating system of the router. We talked about operating systems on computers like Windows and those types of things. But routers have what they call firmware, which is similar to an operating system. And most routers, when you go into the administrative console, you can push a button and it will quickly check to see if there's a newer version of the firmware. And it's the same concepts that we talked about with the operating systems, because over time, flaws are identified in the firmware. Then the vendor may produce a patch, and so updating the firmware will insulate you against all those known flaws, putting the newer version on there. So that's one of the first things. And the second thing is making sure that you do set a password on that router. And if the broadband provider that gave it to you gave you a password, it's probably the same password that they use at all of their other clients. And so that means that if your neighbor's using the same type of router, unless you change your administrative password, it's the same as your neighbor's, which means that your neighbor could possibly, since they would know their password, they could try to log onto your router and access it. And so you'll want to go in and change that to something that only you know, so that you're not, you don't fall victim to some sort of attack that targets all the customers of a single vendor.
Right. Right. And it's almost, if you don't change that default password, that's one of the things that, especially as someone who has malicious intent, that's gonna be the first thing they try.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it
and that's
won't
easy.
be
But of
that
course,
difficult.
the nature of routers, and most routers kind of, moving on to the wireless feature, most routers have a wireless capability, and which means that you don't even have to be physically in the home. You could literally sit, in the driveway or even across the street, depending on how strong the signal is and how close you are, and you
Right.
could attempt to log in that way. And so it is something we need to make sure we pay attention to is getting those passwords set.
Right. And I mean, even just talking about wireless, this is actually perfect gateway into the next thing, but WPS, the Wi-Fi protected setup is what that stands for. Make
Yes.
sure that you need to make sure that's disabled.
Yeah, and so William, that's a great point. As from an attacker's perspective, why would having WPS enabled be enticing to you if you were trying to break into a router?
Right. So WPS is something that typically you use to connect and essentially form a connection with the router, so that you're on the network. Right. For me, that's awesome to leverage. That's a great gateway for me to get into it. Let's say I have physical access to something. I can just click a button and I'm on. I don't have to know the password. I can just go straight in.
Yep, yep. So that feature, of course, was intended to make it easy to set the router up. So the vendor, when they envisioned it, they said, "Hey, let's make it easy for people who buy our routers to quickly click a button and get their devices connected." And so, while the intent was good, of course, anything like that makes it, with someone with malicious intent can exploit that, and that's why we typically say turn off the Wi-Fi protected setup and the universal plug and play features, which is typically abbreviated UP&P. Those two things work the same way. Turn those off and configure your network manually once you've got it set up, which means as you bring on new devices, you'll have to, program that device to connect to the network by putting in your network username and password. So when we're talking about wireless networks, wireless networking uses encryption to protect the communication between the device that we're accessing the network from and the network itself. But over time, the encryption capabilities that were designed into the wireless protocols have been cracked. They eventually become weaker, if that makes sense. And so most of the newer routers will include several different versions of encryption, and you should always activate the highest version, the version that has the highest number. WPA2 or WPA3 are the two most common that are in use right now. And so if you have WPA3, you should use that. If you don't, you should use WPA2. And that'll give you the best encryption that's available in your device. And that helps reduce the chance that somebody who's grabbing packets out of the air, because that's what wireless is. It's networking, floating around in the air, who's grabbing those packets and trying to decrypt them. It would reduce the chance they could actually decrypt and read your data and potentially get passwords or gain access to your network.
Right. And so branching out from that, as far as setting up Wi-Fi networks goes with the security options, is there a need for a guest Wi-Fi? What's the use case of a guest Wi-Fi?
Yeah, if you're somebody who has people at your home a lot that want to get their devices on the internet, if you use an example, I have a teenage daughter, and so she often has friends over, and the friends have cellular plans that are not unlimited. So naturally, their parents have taught them when they go to a friend's house to ask if they can put their phone on the Wi-Fi, so they don't have to use their cellular plan while they're visiting and using their phones. And so I'm happy to put them on the Wi-Fi, but I don't want them on my private Wi-Fi. Because that's the same Wi-Fi I'm using to do my computing and communicate with my company's network, those types of things. And so if your router will support it, and many routers do, you can actually set up a guest network. And the way that the router will actually segment that off, and it will allow those devices on the guest network to get directly to the internet, which is all they need. They just need to get to the internet so they can communicate with social media sites and YouTube and those types of things. But it will keep them from being able to access all of your devices that you have on your home network. And therefore, if someone were trying to be malicious, they wouldn't be able to steal data from your home network. And plus, you wouldn't have to give them your home network password. You would set a separate password that's different from your home network password. And so you're not having to give out your password either.
And so I guess the last little bonus tip that we have here is that whenever you do set up your Wi-Fi network, make sure you walk around your house and testing your network connectivity and adjust the router as need be. Because sometimes it takes a few times moving the router around the house or making some little fidgets to it to make sure it actually covers everything you need it to cover.
Yes, and the second thing is signal bleed. Meaning I mentioned earlier in the example that someone sit in your driveway, or could they actually sit out at the street without even coming in your driveway, say by your mailbox?
Good point.
And if they can pick up your wireless signal, then that would give them a chance to potentially try to connect to your network and sit there and try to hack. And so a lot of routers have antennas, and those antennas are adjustable. And so by moving those antennas around a little bit, and then, as you say, kind of walking around your house, maybe the perimeter of your home with a phone or a laptop, and watching how your signal, the little fan, that typically displays your wireless signal, watching how that goes up or down, it'll give you a good feel for how far your signal bleeds outside your home, and you could adjust that to somewhere where you're comfortable.
I guess here's the last section we really need to kind of harp on. Honestly, this is a pretty big thing right now that a lot of people are curious about. And truthfully, even me myself, I'm constantly looking at this stuff. But how do we protect our online identity? And how do we monitor the information that's out there in the public? How do we keep people from getting our phone numbers or our emails or anything else really sensitive like a social security number?
Yeah, William. Well, up to this point, we've talked a lot about technical configurations, how we secure our computers and our phones and some of those things. But now this is about our privacy. This is about the personal information about us that we would not want people to know that aren't in our close circle. And so the first thing we can do is we can check our credit regularly there's a site called annualcreditreport.com. And so you can go to that site, and courtesy of the United States government, the credit bureaus will provide you with a copy of your credit report. once a year at no cost. And so you can download that, you can review that, and make sure that you're familiar with all the items. And if you see something on there that you don't think is right and you need to go through a dispute process, there's a link on the site that will guide you through how to communicate with the credit bureau and walk through that. So that's the first step, is seeing what's out on your credit today, what's attributed to you, and make sure that that's really all the things, all the credit you've taken out and all the ways that you're spending your funds.
Right.
A second thing you can do to insulate yourself, because probably all of us know somebody. Hopefully, it's not ourselves, but probably all of us know somebody who've had their identity stolen in some way, and it's very inconvenient, frustrating, a little concerning. And so, one of the other things you can do is you can actually freeze your credit again for free at each of the 3 credit bureaus. Now, you do this by visiting the sites independently, and on their homepage, there's a freeze my credit option, and it will allow you to make a few clicks, and you provide them with just a little bit of information, and they'll freeze your credit. And what that does is it basically says, hey, no one can take out credit using your name, your social security number, your identity without you unfreezing it. And so, if you decide you want to go buy a new car, for example, and you're going to take out a loan for that car, you're going to need to go out online before you go to the car dealership and unfreeze your credit. Otherwise, when the car dealer's finance department runs your credit, it's going to come back as locked, and they're not going to be able to get any information. So you will need to unfreeze it when you want to take out credit, but this does not prevent you from using credit cards that you already have. It's really just taking out new credit in your name. So you can freeze your credit for free at each credit bureau, and that will also provide you with a measure of protection.
Right. Now, Mark, what about if I have a document here? Like, let's say I printed out a document, like a W-4, W-2. Um, what if I want to get rid of that and I don't want to keep it anymore? Can I just throw it in the trash, or what?
Well, you can. Of course, you can throw it in the trash, but that's not ideal. Anything that's got your personal sensitive information on it, ideally, you want to make sure that that's destroyed one way or another, so that someone couldn't grab it out of the trash and read it and have information about you. And so, the simplest way to do that is to go to your favorite tech supply store, or get on your favorite online site and order a shredder. And those are relatively inexpensive. You take basically what you do when you're done, you take the document, you run it through the shredder, and it cuts it into a bunch of little pieces. And then periodically, when that trash can is full, you can dump that in your trash, and then dispose of it in the way you normally would. So it's really important to shred documents that contain personal information on them. Also, if you work at home, I'm going to kind of a bonus tip here for your employers. If you work at home a lot, you're probably processing information for your employer. And when you're done with that information, I'm sure your employer wants you to keep it safe and secure. So that's another good reason to have a shredder. You could shred that at your home, and much like you would do if you were in your employer's office and you walk down the hall and they have one of those big bins that you slide it in the slot, and then every so often they have a vendor come and take those off and replace them. Well, that's what they're doing. They're shredding all that data. So just be thoughtful about anything that's got sensitive information. You want to make sure that it is destroyed before you dispose of it.
Right. And I mean, not to harp on the same topic again, but online, it's still important that you change your passwords for all your online accounts, or just keep strong passwords in place there. Because if let's say you change your information, you change your address, whatever it may be, if you update any of that online and someone already has your password, that's still another step and another way for them to get your identity. So make sure that you continuously have strong passwords for your online accounts.
Yeah, we can't. The reason we started with passwords, William, as you know, is because that's kind of the key to our privacy is the password, because that's that's again how we prove who we are, who we say we are. And so we can't emphasize enough how important it is to choose good passwords, have different ones for each online site, configure multi-factor authentication, and keep tabs on those passwords, and make sure that we're comfortable that they've not been compromised.
Right. And I mean, even going on password storage, because we were talking about that earlier. From what I understand, you need to wipe your electronic device before you dispose of it, before you sell it. Is that really a big thing? I feel like, I can just go into Apple and just trade it in, and they'll just take it off my hands for me. Do I really need to wipe it and get all the information off of it?
Well, William, the way that hard drives work, as you know, is the hard drives store data on them, and then many hard drives, when we hit erase, what the hard drive does, it doesn't actually delete the data. It basically deletes the pointer to the data, which means the data's there. It just tells the computer, hey, forget that there's data there. So what that means is the next time the computer needs to write something, it can go back and write in that spot, and it writes over the old data. And so if we just tell the computer to forget that data, meaning we delete it, someone who gets that hard drive could actually use some specially designed software, and they could still read the data that's on those hard drives. And so when we dispose of computers, it's really important to make sure that we are destroying the hard drive that's in the computer, or making sure that we're comfortable that it's been wiped properly. And there's some software you can download on the internet that will do that wiping for you and make sure that it's protected. And then for your phone and your iPads and things like that, when you trade those in, the good news is those device manufacturers have made it pretty easy. Usually in the Android operating system or in Apple's iOS, you can actually go in and you can say, I want you to secure wipe this, and it will do that. It will go through and it will securely delete the device, restore it back to factory settings, brand new, forget all of your data, and it's protected. And so at that point, then once you've done that and it comes back up with that brand new hello, welcome screen or whatever, you'll know that it's a fresh device, doesn't have your data, and you can confidently hand it over to your provider.
Right. Right. And I mean, this is definitely kind of a backwoods suggestion here. Not even a suggestion, but I do know that people do this. If you are completely getting rid of a hard drive, or you are completely getting rid of any kind of storage device, I do know people that will take a drill and just drill a hole straight through it.
Yes, well, that's not as backwoods as some friends that I know who actually like to shoot it with shotguns, which is kind of fun. Instead of using skeet, they actually flip the hard drives up in the air and they have target practice on those hard
There
drives
it
to make
is.
sure they're destroyed that way. So, yes, one way or another, you can, of course, the ones that are drilled or shot with shotguns, they're not going to be used again. If you want the hard drive to be used again, you can wipe it securely and you can reuse it. But it really depends on what your intent
Right.
is.
Right. And I mean, going on from that to the next thing, you always want to make sure that, especially for your financial accounts, and like Mark mentioned earlier, we talked about passwords. That's kind of the centerpiece of everything. For all of your accounts, not even just the beginning of it, but make sure that you have your alerts turned on for any kind of financial accounts. For me, I have my credit card alerts turned on. I have any kind of financial anything for mine turned on. Because you never know whenever someone may grab your information, may try and access it, may make a charge on your account. If you're at a gas station and someone has a little device inside of a gas pump, those are typically called skimmers. They look just like the actual gas pump card swiper. They can grab your information that way, and then you'll get a ding on your phone if you have alerts turned on. Hey, someone just tried to do something. Let me lock my card.
Yep, yeah, William, that's a great point. I have account alerts turned on for my bank account for when someone logs in, as well as for all of my credit cards when they're used. And that's actually, those alerts have actually helped me a number of times where I've gotten an alert and known, hey, my card was just used, it wasn't me, and I've been able to quickly contact the card itself and say, hey, I think my card may have been compromised. And sure enough, they'll look and say, yes, it does look like that, we see activity and that it isn't you. And so they're able to quickly, get that off my record, issue me a clean card, and we move on, and the attacker is thwarted. And so turning on those account alerts is completely free. It'll give you those notifications and an extra peace of mind.
Perfect. And then I guess another thing we need to bring up is talking about your mailbox and how you get mail every day. How do you make sure that someone doesn't come by and swipe your mail or take a package that you may have delivered to your house?
Yeah, William, this is a really cool capability that the United States Postal Service made available to us a few years ago. And I think a lot of people don't know about this yet. But as a part of the services they provide, because they're processing so much mail every day, the computers that they use to route the mail take pictures of all the mail. And so what they started doing is you can sign up for informed delivery, which in essence, the United States Postal Service is going to send you a picture the day before what your mail is going to be the next day. And so you'll see all the pieces of mail that are bound for your home, as well as a list of any packages that the Postal Service is going to be delivering. And that will allow you then, because you have that will allow you then to marry up what's actually in your mailbox with what you received the day before as notification. And you would know if somebody grabbed pieces of mail out of your mailbox before you got home, for example, if you were concerned about that. And so it's a really good feature. It's important for you to sign up for it, because if you don't, someone else can. The way that they do it, it's kind of the first person that signs up with a particular street address, then they'll send them those pictures. And so if you don't do it, someone else could, in theory, sign up and then see what kind of mail you're getting, and then they could drive to your house and come and grab out mail that they might find interesting. So it's a really, really good service, and something that I would recommend there. And then William, we talked a lot about privacy and identity, and there's lots of great tips. You and I could do an entire podcast on this, but I want to be sensitive to everyone's time and really just kind of say, kind of buttoning things up here. It's really important to regularly review our account statements that we have, because that obviously, that'll give us information that we might see if there's any wrong transactions on there, and it would allow us to look into those. So review those on a regular basis, and then subscribe to an identity monitoring service. You could turn one of those on, and they can actually notify you when certain things are happening. When they see your information on the dark web, for example, if they see information about you that shows up in one of the hacker channels, they'll actually notify you and give you instructions on how to respond or what you need to do about that. And then of course we always need to be mindful that we should never click on unfamiliar email links. The old email phishing attacks are still happening a lot. And so a lot of times the attackers will send out a lot of emails, and they're hoping somebody will click a link, and that would allow them to start the process of invading your privacy or stealing your identity. And so if we avoid clicking on those email links, we're going to lessen the chance that we're going to be victimized.
Right. I mean, all great points, Mark. Thank you so much. I guess a few things we need to reiterate before we go. That way, you're not trying to keep all this garbled information in your brain. We can just kind of summarize it for you really fast. Everybody, just remember that the internet, it's a great resource for information and entertainment. You can learn a lot from it. You can find a lot there. Just be aware that it is also an avenue to security breaches and identity theft. Making sure that you understand and you're vigilant and diligent, that you're staying safe online. It's a very important thing, and just make sure you're following some of those common security and identity practices that are there. There are several free resources that you can utilize that are available to keep computers and data safe. We mentioned some of those in this podcast, and you can also educate your family members and friends about cybersecurity issues. Now, if all of this actually just flew over your head, that's perfectly fine if it did. We talked about a lot. Mark has been so kind to put together an awesome resource for us that we're going to share in the description down below. We'll put a link right there for you to click on it, that has everything that we talked about laid out for you, with links to places where you can go and check out and learn more about these specific security practices and all these things we talked about. So
yeah, William, this is something that, as I said in the beginning, I was so passionate about this. I know we are at LBMC so passionate about sharing this information that we were happy to produce this resource, easily clickable links that listeners can click, and they can get access to some of the tools and the tips and configurations and things that'll walk you through how to securely configure a Windows computer, a Mac, those types of things, for example. So I know you're going to put a copy of the link in the show notes, and I hope people will take advantage of that free resource.
For sure. Thank you so much for your time, Mark, and thanks for sharing the information with everybody.
Oh, yeah. It's been great to chat with you, William, as always, and really appreciate the opportunity. And I just want to say to everybody, stay secure.
Have a good one, everybody. Thanks for listening.